I want to welcome you all here. We are having a pretty interesting panel on a subject called Internet TV Technology, Defining the Connected TV, Tablet, and Smartphone Interactive Consumer Experience. And that's a mouthful, but what it really relates to, basically, once you get the programming, well, what can you do to enhance its advantages to you, the ability to discover it, to play with it, to be immersed in it, etc. And there is so many things that have been going on. By the way, my name is David Leibowitz. I'm moderating the panel. I'm managing partner of CH Potomac. I have interest in a variety of digital media companies. I used to be an attorney, but don't hold that against me. And basically what I focus on are working in technologies and companies that create better ways for people to enjoy and experience the content. So it sort of fits nicely with the panel we have today. I want to first start off, before I introduce the panel, to ask some questions of the audience, and there's also going to be later on some more questions. But how many of you subscribe to cable today? Cable or satellite? Yeah. Okay. And how many who did not raise their hands subscribe to an over-the-top type services, broadband, smart TV, access content that way? One. Okay. Now, did you, I guess it's just one, so I'll just ask you, are you a cord cutter or a cord never? Cord cutter. Okay, so we also have a lot of cord nevers here, but they also haven't connected to anything other than, I guess, over-the-air TV. How many people watch TV here? For those, okay, well, that's a good start, too. There's been so many changes going on in the market. And very rapidly. I mean, every few months we have panels along these lines, and the amount of additional means, additional networks, new services, new capabilities are really changing rapidly, and all for the better, ideally, for the consumer. But so, for example, what I want to first talk about how it's changed in terms of the connected TV front. So by the close of 2014, there were more than 22 million televisions that were actively connected to the internet in the U.S. And that was compared with 13 million at the close of 2013. And for the first time, those number of connected TVs exceeded the number of Blu-ray player connections in the U.S. Now, that's going to be even increasing more greatly in the coming years. So according to MPD, by 2017, there's going to be 47 million connected TVs within 30 million U.S. internet homes. And just this past week, Parks Associates reported that 55% of U.S. broadband households receive an over-the-air service. They subscribe to an over-the-air service, which is up from 44% in 2013. So that's really jumping. In terms of the availability of different programming services, and there's been a lot of ones that have either been reported to be launched or have actually launched. So, for example, Dish Network very recently launched what they call Sling TV, which is not to be confused with a Slingbox. They're the same parent company but different divisions, which is a streaming service that goes over the top for $20 a month, and that's really aimed at millennials. And one of the key points of Sling TV, aside from the price, which is a very attractive price from a millennial's perspective, although I'm not one myself, I've been told it is also the fact that you have ESPN built into that package, and that's the first one of that kind, although it may not be the last. Sony has their own PlayStation Vue streaming service. It's now only been available in New York, Philadelphia, and I think Chicago. I'm not positive about that, at $49.99 a month. So that's a higher price point. They do not have ESPN. They have a whole wide array of programming. It's not clear whether it's just focused on millennials or a broader range of audiences. And Apple reportedly aims to deliver 25 channels of programming through their service, which has not come out yet, for somewhere between $30 and $40 a month. We're also waiting for Verizon to launch their web TV service, and DirecTV has grudgingly acknowledged that they may be doing one as well. So that's how it is in terms of these sort of almost like multi-channel service providers, similar to how cable and satellite systems have been. But there's also been separate over-the-air content services that have come out over the last few months that also have been changing the field very rapidly. So, for example, CBS introduced their CBS Access over-the-top service for $5.99 a month, and that offers 6,500 episodes of CBS programming, next day availability of new programs. So by next day, I mean the day after broadcast, it's available through the over-the-top CBS Access. And also live streaming from more than 70 of their affiliate TV stations. WWE has their own network, which is available for $9.99 a month. And Nickelodeon is focusing, obviously, as you would expect, on the children's programming side. They will be launching an ad-free service named Noggin, aimed at preschoolers that will be going for $5.99 a month. So from the programming side, a lot is happening. I want to tell you how, at least statistically, based on different studies, the viewing habits vary among the different age groups that we all are. We're in one or the other, as far as that goes. More people than ever are accessing video content from the internet. And so, for example, you have 71% of the U.S. population accesses some video content from the internet. That could be pay or free services, and that rose from 66% in 2013. And according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, cable subscriptions among viewers under 25 dropped by 6% in 2013. The under 25 category, which is age 18 to 25, is known as trailing millennials, and I'll get more into what those terms mean in a few moments. At the same time, 72% of broadband users in that trailing millennial group are subscribing to over-the-top services and paying for those. And for those that are leading millennials, which is the 25 to 34 age group, they're only 1% behind them, 71%. So there's a lot of that activity in that space. When you go, though, in terms of where they watch and what sort of devices, the younger ones, mostly the trailing millennials, watch most of their video content on their smartphones and tablets and PCs. So, you know, they spend 57% of their time watching video that way, and compare that to the other age groups, so that leading millennials spend 57% of their time watching video on television. Generation X, which is age 32 to 48, 70% of their viewing is still on the TV. Baby boomers, which are 49 to 67, which I guess I'm a baby boomer. I guess the term baby is a bit of an oxymoron when they're now in that age group. 81% of them are watching primarily on television. And they don't have a name for those that are 68 and over, other than calling them 68 and over, or old folks.
It's the silent generation.
I beg your pardon?
I think it's called the silent generation.
The silent generation.
Not in my family, it's not.
That's different than the silent majority, though, right? And they are 90% of those 68 and over are watching on television. So what I want to do now is also talk about how the environment of even the established services and how they've been having to change what they do, like Sling TV has done, which is you know, part of Dish Network, in trying to reach other subscribers in different age groups and try to have different offerings than the full panoply of video programming that we've been used to receiving on cable and satellite. So, for example, Verizon just began offering a service called Custom TV, which is a package that is, I think, for $55 a month. You will get 35 channels of programming, and then and as well you'll get 2 group segments of programming, the special groups which are packaged either for sports, lifestyle, entertainment, news, etc. And as I'll mention in a few moments, there is some interesting legal challenges in connection with what they're trying to do, because they, by taking services out of their basic service tier, there are questions about whether or not that's consistent with their carriage agreements from some of their content network providers So, for example, I know that both 21st Century Fox, ESPN, and NBC Universal have, cried foul to Verizon about that, and ESPN now launched a suit against them. And I don't think it was really unexpected, especially when their models that have been going on historically have been premised on the widest base of subscribers from an advertising perspective and also from a subscriber fee perspective. And in ESPN's case, they make, I think, $5.60 per subscriber on the cable side. So that can have a significant impact on what they do. Cablevision, which is based in the New York City area, now offers a kind of a novel approach, calling it a cord cutter package, where they provide broadband service, give you a digital TV antenna and Wi-Fi, bundled with a phone service at a very attractive price. And it's through that you'll also be able to receive the over-the-top services. And they also just made a deal with Hulu for Hulu Plus, which I think they may also be offering to their traditional cable subscribers. But what we have here are people and experts from companies that really are working on the under-the-hood aspects of the encoding of the programming, delivery of the programming, trying to create better experiences tied to the programming, the aggregation, et cetera, and to really give you some insights about where this is all heading. And so I want to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to ask them each to talk a little bit about their company. But on my immediate left, your right, is Kanaan Jamili, who is CEO of New Lion. Just on a personal basis, Kanaan and I have been friends since 1997 when we worked together in a company called Aris Technologies that became Verance. And Kanaan was one of our lead scientists and engineers developing an audio watermark technology that's become a standard in the motion picture industry and elsewhere. And it makes me feel like a proud papa to see somebody, to have somebody that grew beyond an extremely talented scientist to a corporate executive. So welcome, Kanaan. I have no other children on the panel, but I do have Mark Jeffrey, who's Senior Director for Technical Strategy of the MediaCon Group of Exxon. Ericsson. Oh, what did I say? Exxon?
Yeah, there's no oil business here.
Okay, well, you didn't read the Wall Street Journal this morning. Rhodes Mason is next to Mark, and Rhodes is the CEO of the Internet Video Archive, which it sort of sounds like what it is, or is what it sounds, but we'll talk and learn more about what Rhodes and IVA are doing in the space. Next to Rhodes is Jim Monroe, who is the co-founder and SVP of programming for Net2 TV, which has been a very exciting service, both in terms of delivering their own programming and now how they're expanding their technology to others. And so Jim will be talking more about that. Next to Jim is Bruce Lancaster, who is Vice President and General Manager of Harmony and the new Ventures Group as part of Logitech, which is a parent company. And last but not least is Matt Smith, who is VP of Product Line Management for Concurrent. So let's just go down the line. Kanaan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what New Lion is doing in the space?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks, David, for the intro. I'm also excited to be working with you for a couple of hours at least, since 2001. So New Lion is really an end-to-end platform provider that powers some of the most of the professional sports in the U.S., also around the world, NFL, NBA, NHL, and so forth. We have about 50,000 events that we covered last year. We also do provide TV Everywhere services to Rogers and Univision and others. We're based in New York with offices in San Diego and another 9 countries. We do specialize in really building experiences for specific sports, for specific OTT services and TV Everywhere services.
Thank you, Kanaan. Mark?
Mark Jeffrey with Ericsson. Our core business has historically been the radio business, or with a mobile network, cell towers and base stations, things like that. We have been in the media space for quite a while and ramped up our efforts more recently, as media is one of our main areas of momentum right now, along with the radio networks, IP and cloud, OSS, BSS. We believe in something called the Network Society, and that's by the year 2020, everything that can, everyone that can be connected will be connected. Any screen that's any screen that's delivered will be capable of having video on it, and you will connect people to people, people to devices, people to machines, things like that. So 50 billion connected devices, 15 billion of them being video enabled by 2020.
Well, it
Rhodes.
sounds like you're big enough for Exxon. Rhodes?
Rhodes Mason Internet Video Archive. We've been around for 12 years, and we're the largest online distributor of movie, TV, and game previews. We've really developed an idea of content as a service. So we work with the studios, networks, publishers to bring in their promotional content, datafy it, map it against the major data providers such as Arobi, Gracenote/DMS, Redbee Media, et cetera, and create a service via APIs to be able to place those things at the point of purchase or in content discovery. And the Diffusion Group back in 2013 said that a trailer is the #1 piece of entertainment data that consumers are looking for when deciding what to watch and buy. So I'm out there evangelizing that position.
Thank you, Rhodes.
David, first let me thank you for the note asking us not to wear jackets. However, you posted to Google+. Maybe do Facebook next time, and it'll reach you.
Well, I'm not wearing a jacket.
Exactly. I'm with Net2 TV. Net2 TV began as a company, sort of a modern-day streaming media company, meaning that we licensed content from some very well-known brands, distributed and monetized that content to what is now 47 million connected devices, plus Android and iOS app stores. We have recently kind of made a turn in the business to take what we've developed for ourselves and our partners and offering it up to other people. So we're now in the business of taking the tools that we built, the CMS, the distribution, the applications themselves, and turning them loose for third-party clients to do the same thing we have done, which is to say build a large-scale, thoroughly monetized, over-the-top video network, streaming network.
Thank you, Jim. Bruce?
So Bruce Lancaster, I run the Harmony Group, Logitech Harmony Group, and I am not in the media business, but what really I'm about is controlling the media, giving people access to, on all these different connected devices that they have in their home, which are multiplying every day, and making that simple access available to them. So as the world gets more complicated, we're trying to simplify that experience. So the 68 and over crowd or the 5 and under crowd are able to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch.
Thank you, Bruce.
I'm Matt Smith with Concurrent. We're a global software and solutions provider. We develop content delivery systems and real-time applications that run on a high-performance Linux and storage platform. We've been in the video delivery space for a couple of decades now. We're some of the early pioneers in video on demand for set-top boxes with the cable providers. And now we provide basically a unified system for Tier 1 providers around the world that supports delivery of content to both traditional set-tops as well as over-the-top content, supporting multiple formats off of a single instance of the content to begin with. We can apply digital rights management, provide CDN and caching solutions and capabilities for those providers as well, so that they can really implement one system that covers both the traditional investment that they have as well as all the emerging new technologies and the adoption that's happening with consumers.
Thanks a lot. First question I have, the panel is entitled talking about the interactive consumer experience, and interactive can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I'd first like to get each of your sense of what it means for you, and then we're going to go through a little more details about some of those. So we're going to go back this way. So why don't you begin?
I think for me, interactivity is having some control over what you're seeing and what you're consuming but it also needs to be easy, as you said earlier when we were talking before the panel started. So, you know, there's a challenge for me. We've seen lots of attempts at interactivity, you know, in the past years, and it's not always worked well. It's been sometimes a little bit different depending on who your service provider was or what type of a device you were accessing the content with. And, you know, for me, I think you see good examples of it with some of the things that are out there. You know, Comcast Xfinity system has a good guide with some good interactive capabilities. You see other implementations of that with things like Netflix or Amazon or other types of solutions. You see it with the kind of the second screen device, where you have things like the Shazam app that you can pull up on your iPhone while you're watching a TV program and get more detail about what's happening on that show. So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it. The key thing, I believe, is to make sure that the quality is really good. If you expect people to pay for the content and pay for access to the content and be able to monetize it, the quality has to be rock solid. You got to treat it like it's a mission critical application and make it easy to use.
Now, you distinguish on the pay versus the free side, but when you say free, I mean, I would think even on the ad-supported services, they want to be rock solid too, so that their viewers are going to stay there. But so are you contrasting that to, I mean, almost everything's sort of ad-supported, even YouTube today, but are you contrasting it to YouTube or those sorts of free services versus others like CBS News has their own over-the-top service that's free, that provides a linear stream of news. That I guess has to be pretty solid as well.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point. You know, and it really comes down to the perception of the consumer, right? So I'm thinking of it from the perspective that, you know, I have two sons. One of them is 5, and he loves to watch Evan on YouTube, right, playing video games and unpacking toys and all of these kind of things. And for him, the perception of quality is, you know, whether he has the patience to wait 5 seconds while the video buffers if there's some delay. Right? Contrast that to trying to watch a movie on Amazon Prime on my smart TV with my wife, and if it buffers, she gets impatient and starts to tell me that Amazon Prime stinks, right? Because, and then I have to explain that it's because the Wi-Fi is slow in the house, and then I end up running the 40-foot blue Ethernet cable from the TV to the router, and everything works fine, and then she's happy. So there's a difference in expectation, I think, depending on the consumer.
And also, fault lies not necessarily with those that the consumer thinks fault lies with this, and yet they're the ones that get the complaints. So, Bruce?
Yeah, and as more content is coming to consumers on different devices, this interaction is becoming more and more complex. You know, one of the interesting stats that you know, we've learned, because we control so many multi-millions of consumers, and we have data on what people are using to watch what, is game consoles are the #1 streaming device. If you look at Netflix, for example, that people bring into their house. We're talking about connected smart TVs, but there's a lot of other connected devices that we don't often think about as the primary focus point for these activities. And then you have a whole host of other devices, Amazon TV or Apple TV, you know, the Fire TV, you know, Google Chromecast Media Stick, Roku, and I can go on and on and on about these different devices, and they all give a little bit different of experience. So, and you have to learn that, and consumers are trying to figure out in this new complex world, what's broke in this system? Because before it used to be wiggle the antenna ears, and I'm really showing my age, you wiggle the antenna ears until the signal came in, and it was kind of an analog experience that was pretty easy to figure out. Now it's, is it my Wi-Fi? Is it my internet service provider? Is it the Amazon Prime? Is it Netflix? Or is it the box that's now streaming this that isn't have enough bandwidth? And many companies are rushing to try to provide solutions for that. And I think the fear is it's getting more complex. So I think the industry, and we're certainly at the heart of this, is trying to simplify that experience, because at the end of the day, it's all about user experience. It's how well the users can access what they want to watch when they want to watch it, whether it's your 5-year-old son or your spouse or whoever.
One of the other issues with the variety of players out there that you identified, whether smart TVs or Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks or Amazon Fire, Apple TV, et cetera, is that they don't have the same availability of services within those.
Yep.
And so sometimes that creates some expectations that aren't met, or certainly confusion, and you may just have multiple devices. And often, especially now with so many TVs come out that have smart TV built into it, you may have a smart TV that will have some capabilities, but then you will still be adding another box or a stick to receive some services that were not included there. So
Exactly, and not all these connected devices are equal. You know, a $39 stick cannot be compared in raw horsepower to a $400 game console. They're not the same, and how the content providers deal with that is probably beyond most consumers, but something that has to be dealt with.
So Jim, staying on the interactive front, you know, what do you think of, when you think of interactive, what does it mean to you?
Well, I think similar to what's been said before, I think interactivity for us is all about what consumers need to do in order to accomplish greater choice, convenience, and control. You know, we specialize in long-form, kind of engaging, more lean-back programming. So we don't expect people to interact with the programming itself necessarily, but they have a fair amount of interaction they have to do to get the programming to play out. And I think one of the, especially when you get into OTT and are trying to develop across multiple devices, one of the challenges is, you know, a button press on Samsung could be a completely different, you know, signal than a button press on LG or Roku. And so unifying not only the UI, but also the interactive, you know, devices, so that they all do the same thing. So if you start watching a show on Roku and you finish it on Samsung, you don't have to learn a whole new paradigm for navigating the video. That's actually fairly difficult to do.
You know, staying on that track, let me go back to Bruce for a second, because you, with Harmony, have the remote controls. These are on your universal controls. Can you program it so that you have Roku, as well as, you know, an LG TV and other services built into that control itself? And how does that deal with it?
So we are working on activity-based control, but just as the consumers are a little bit confused as to what platforms can do what, these platforms don't necessarily make it very easy to give that direct control. So you can watch Netflix on a Fire TV, but does Netflix allow that one-touch control the way many smart TVs do? It's kind of a spectrum of situations out there. So what we've done is, if we see that, and this is common in a lot of connected homes, where you actually have multiple choices to watch the content, maybe the same content, at your disposal. So what we're doing is trying to pick the best avenue that gives the best experience to the users with a one touch of a button. So we'll see, oh, you have these 5 devices, and I'm not trying to pitch any one device over another, but you have these 5 for this thing that you're trying to do. We'll pick the top one,
right,
and try to bring that one touch experience. But it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. So Rhodes, any differing views or additional views on interactivity?
I do. Read an interesting article recently about Airbnb and Uber and how they own nothing. They don't own hotels. They don't own cars. What they have done is created convenience, and convenience is really at the heart of the consumer experience. And what we've seen is a lot of stabs at it in content discovery, trying to find the best way to help the consumer. I think devices, it's going to change. Your kitchen tabletop could be glass censored and be a screen, so screens could be everywhere. And with the declining cost of sensors, this whole Internet of Things is definitely going to be upon us, with, you know, the screens being able to react to you, the individual, because of the phone in your pocket. So interactivity is about tools. And today we have available tools. Tomorrow we see some of that in the tracks here with the VR and the AR tracks that are happening at this conference. And beyond that, you know, it's really, you know, Jules Verne, you know, future stuff. I think what, though, you have to do is appeal to the consumer. If I want to engage in a certain content, finding it and making it available to me without, do I have a subscription to Netflix, so it lives over there, oh, it doesn't live on my Amazon. It's confusing. And as content creators, we're making the marketplace more difficult than we need to, content creators and distributors, where if we can unify an experience that was mentioned and create kind of a smart content discovery, I think, it'll bring more engagement, because the content we want to engage with is everywhere. It's in all disparate places. It's not under one roof. So, as you said, my kid will watch YouTube way before they turn on the TV. Nickelodeon's broadcast viewership, I think, dropped 44% year over year. It's a changing market, and content creators need to be doing things to make their content pop, and interactivity is a pathway to that.
You know, it's interesting you talked about Uber on the interactivity side. In a similar one, it's certainly unrelated to this area, but you could see it possibly extending. I use OpenTable, and OpenTable now has a new capability, at least in the DC area where I live, where certain restaurants participate, and you could get your bill, get your check, and pay your check all on your phone without ever having to talk to the waiter or waitress and get the bill, etc. But what struck me is that as soon as I was done, when I checked off that yes, pay, then Uber pops up. So that if you're at a place where you don't have your car and you want to have a car come to you, it's already going there. So, I mean, think about it in this area. If you've watched a movie or a television show, not necessarily ordering a pizza, but, would you like to get would you like to download or get a stream on queue, for example, to watch this television show or movie going forward?
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of recommendation engines out there that are trying to create that rabbit hole for consumers to engage in more and more content. Netflix, of course, has their own, but nobody, Roku has kind of something that you can search and browse across all their providers, which I think is moving closer to kind of this holy grail that we're all, in this industry trying to facilitate.
And I think Roku also has, I think, like a Barker channel, which just goes out and tells you what's available in the various offerings that are on the Roku. Mark, any additional thoughts on interactivity?
Yeah, I think that the one recurring theme is that interactivity kind of morphs over time, and what was interactive before, you didn't have the tools, and it was kind of a technology-forced interactivity. Whereas now, especially with the millennials, it's more of an expected interactivity. You now have common denominators between operating systems and devices and things like that, so you can share things, start-stop programming from one device to the other. But to what Rhodes says, I think also a piece of it is smart content aggregation, and the problem there is if I have all these devices, I have all these apps, I have all this programming to search and find what I want when I want to watch it in one UI, that's the problem, right? And everybody wants to own that, whether it's a programmer, an operator, or a TV manufacturer. So we have wild days ahead.
Very wild. Kanan?
I think the expectation is getting higher and higher, and on certain from certain users, from certain specific services that have been around for some time, like Netflix, like the NFL. We power the NFL. So in a way, when you look at some OTT services or services that are interactive, that have been around for 3, 4, 5 years, they're getting into a new expectation area where interactivity has to be really high end. And we specialize in sports, so look at the NHL. If you have the multi-camera that people can watch what's on where the puck is getting to the goalie, and kind of some of these particular things that people are watching for, people are gonna not use that service. So if you look at the spectrum of all the services out there, some people just want to get online. Just give me a service. I want to get my movies, my VOD, clips and so forth. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's these very specialized and very advanced interactive experiences that are really, really moving ahead much faster than the rest of the market. At the same time, I think millennials are expecting more and more. I mean, my daughter would not watch anything except on Apple TV because That's what she grew up doing for the last few years. She's in college, and anything else that doesn't look like Apple TV is kind of strange for her. It's like, I don't want to watch it. Or maybe, people who like Xbox, people like to go back to the points earlier. This is it's a moving target, but we can see there's a league of experiences on interactive TV that are really becoming very popular. Whether we want to, smart TVs have to catch up. Maybe Samsung is there somehow, but the rest of that smart TVs world is still lagging.
So, let me follow up on what you were talking about, because some of your partners in sports leagues already are providing multiple camera angle access. Do you have any data about how much uptake there has been of people using that versus just the regular feed that comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. We have what's called the quality of service and analytics from all of the users out there worldwide in these apps. For hockey, people watch the multicam. I mean, because you want to see what's happening with your team at this angle, and do that. UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, we have 6 cameras always around the game. People will actually switch because they want to see the face of their fighter. So these are actually, and we can see from when we update, there's updates to these apps that go online. People will actually voice their opinion on Facebook and so on. We want to see more of this or more of that, and that multicam is actually very important in the experience.
Do they also do multiple audio? So, for example, from each local team has their own announcers,
That's
and
right.
you can access it that way.
And also, there's even multiple microphones in certain sports where you actually can listen to the fans or to the announcer and from certain angles. And actually we see a lot more of that as we work with our partners in terms of generating the next experience. These are becoming more and more, in demand, I would say.
So I want to, I'm going to ask all of you, I'm going to ask you about different possible interactive features and how, whether it's something, I'd like you to raise your hand if it's something that you find really important and desirable, and if you don't raise your hand, then obviously you don't. And then, I'd like to get everybody's views on that as well. So, for example, we talked a little about second screens and second screen content, which is usually related to the program, and it might tie to the actors, directors, storylines, etc. How many people feel that that's an important component to their viewing? Anybody? Okay, well, second screen.
Like Story Sync that AMC might have with Walking Dead would be a good example. Nobody is really using that. Good. The research is correct.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that was going to get to my next question, though. Does it vary in terms of whether you've not used the second screen after you've watched the program, or if it's a commercial on and accessing, some second screen content then, or is just no interest?
I'm actually in the dinosaur generation, using some of this stuff.
Okay.
The question you asked was, and you can define what is second screen.
Sure.
TV could be a second screen, but assuming you meant that the TV was first screen and the handheld was second. My wife constantly, while she's sitting, is watching TV and going to IMDb or something else.
Okay.
So, in effect, she is doing that, but it's not connected. She has an interest point about what's going on here, so she'll do something there. But if you have a smart TV that will allow you to select something about the key character, or I like that little reveal, so and so forth, and then have it show up on the second screen so it's not to interrupt the general flow. I think that's where this becomes valuable and financially viable for people who are providing service.
There were, probably at least a half a dozen second screen offerings over the last few years that most of them, I think, have, I wouldn't say disappeared, but have been acquired and the technology is being used for other things.
For the last 3 years, Digital Hollywood had a bazillion panels about second screen. I don't see too many this year.
ABC
And
at
I
one
think
point.
the challenge is twofold. One is, do consumers really want it? That's probably the biggest question. But also, how easy is it for them to understand and interact with it? And I think we can never under or overestimate how simple consumer experience needs to be before it goes mass adoption. And I think that's a big challenge that has to be overcome.
Just to throw out a little data on that. So Variety and CEA and NAPTI did a study, and only 13% of the second screen users say that the content synced with TV makes the experience much more enjoyable. So,
Well, ABC
Typically,
for a while,
it's going to be voting and polling. And
Sure.
if you're not doing that, people aren't using it.
ABC about a year and a half ago said that they discovered that the synchronized second screen experiences were getting a disproportionate amount of use during the commercials,
that's
which means they were losing eyeballs from the commercials to the second screen where the monetization was far less robust.
Yep.
So they got out of that business fairly quickly.
And I think a second screen, as everything else, you see it come into digital Hollywood and goes away, like other themes. The main
3D.
thing is these things
Yeah.
they looked at very, very interestingly because they're a threat or an opportunity for the industry. And I think for second screen, for the pay TV companies, they thought it was, a threat. Well, it's not really a big threat. But also from an opportunity point of view, there's really, look at all these companies that were actually acquired or disappeared. There was nothing there, really. We can't monetize it directly. Shazam is probably the exception. But I think the main important thing for interactive TV and OTT is that pay TV and OTT have to really that's the real analysis of risk versus opportunity. And we can see today there's a lot of developments around, I think somebody mentioned Comcast earlier, offering OTT services themselves. And that's where actually the debate is moving towards more pay TV versus OTT and how they, coexist and interact with each other.
Well,
So, let me
just Cablevision adding Hulu is a big
Yeah.
step of this kind of merger. But then you have Netflix taking their public API offline last November,
Yeah.
so that kind of hard to discover stuff unless you're on the inside there, trying to point to, hey, here's this. I think Roku's on the inside, but we're going to see a lot of disparity, and now everybody's going direct to consumer. It's going to get, the fragmentation is only going to get worse.
So in terms of other types of features, another one is personalization, where your TV knows based on your past habits what you like to watch, even at certain day parts, or records programming, and has the capability to, when you turn on your TV, it's going to have something on at least before you want to change channels that they have a sense you're going to want to watch. Is that a feature that people care about? For those who do, raise your hand. Okay, and what's all your views on that? Just for those in the webcast audience, we had 3 yeses out of 50 or so people. Any views on the personalization aspect in terms of an automatic, when you turn on the TV, it's going to already have a program on it you like?
I think it goes to what my expectation or what my desire would be for linear programming combined with on-demand, everything shifting to on-demand with the exception of, real-time things like, sports and news and things like that. Is that really, I don't need 35 channels, I don't need 50 channels, I just need the ones or the programs that I'm interested in. So we have to have the smarts to be able to, see what I'm recording on my DVR, see what I watch on demand through other sources, and be able to be smart enough to say Breaking Bad episode 6 is on tonight. You have 5 on your DVR. Let's create a channel and put 5 before 6. Mm-hmm. So there's some, I think, relatively simple stuff that we can do in order to build those types of personal channels.
It comes down, I think, to the type of device you're talking about. So you mentioned a television, which, in many cases you could have a shared viewing experience, right? You have multiple people in the room. If it's time, day part sensitive, and it's
Right.
3 p.m. and that's when my, kindergartner comes home and turns it on, that might be appropriate, but I wouldn't necessarily want it to pop up Breaking Bad in front of him, right? Because he's not watching that. But if you can have that personalization on a handheld device, which is more of a personal viewing experience, you're not going to all sit around and watch a TV show, on an iPad necessarily. Then I think if you tailor that experience for the type of device, then you get, I think, more benefit out of it.
think you also have to be careful about the clash between personalization and control. This is going back to the early days of TiVo, but TiVo had this TiVo suggestions concept, right? And it would look at what you've watched and suggest other programs that were in your guide that you might want to watch. People liked that okay. But as soon as we started automatically recording the recommended shows, they got really angry. So we stepped over the line between making valuable suggestions and then taking control ourselves of what really should be yours. And that, I think there's always going to be that fine line between how we help and how
So I
we get in
think
the way.
it matters what market you're in, because there are some markets, emerging markets like Africa, for example, where connectivity is very poor compared to where we are. And so you have to do things like proactively push content in off hours and things like that. So it's a little bit different
I can see that.
of a challenge.
So let's talk about sort of the other aspect of personalization, which is discovery and recommendations. Again, based on your viewing habits, which can be a challenge, as you said, on the TV if you have multiple users. Although I wonder if they could recognize your cell phone and know that it's attached to you, and that if that's the one that's in there, maybe you'll go that way. But in terms of recommendations and discovery of content, how important is it to you to have your device say, I think you're going to want to watch this show based on what you've watched previously? Again, well, maybe 3 or 4 people. You sure you want to be in an interactive panel discussion?
I have a question for the audience. Are you guys using recommendations, or are you know what you want and are searching for particular content? What is the bounce there? Is more people browsing or looking for recommendations, and how many are searching for something they actually know? So search is what you use primarily?
Mm-hmm. And by the way, that was around 6 hands, with one emphatic hand that went up. Like, so, but staying on that tack, in terms of search and discovery, you do have silos right now with respect to some of the services where you won't, if you're Netflix, you'll be in the Netflix and search and discovery environment, so it won't necessarily tell you that, gee, that same film or television program might be available on another service that you're also subscribing to or accessing. And in terms of those, I mean, is there a great desire or interest to try to have a unified program guide that would be across all the channels and all the services that you have? And is that something that people would really like? And we have still a minority, but people would, I think there's a sense that that's something that would be a good thing. It's interesting asking these questions because sometimes, and certainly Apple and Steve Jobs, their approach was, don't build for people what they want, build for them what they don't know they want, but they will want once they understand what it is. And maybe I'm just not clear in my description of some of these things, because perhaps it might be better. But.
Can I take a quick crack at that? Because
sure.
We really are at the heart of that with our clients, from New York Times reviews. We work with Rotten Tomatoes, who has aggregated critics ratings, and Flickster, which aggregates consumer or crowd ratings, to Amazon, which is looking at everything that you look at and giving you some kind of faceted search back and recommendations back. So it's really, I think you're right in that people might not know. And content discovery, I find if you're on Netflix and you're looking for something, I've seen this, I've seen this, I've seen everything. How do I find the thing I want to see that I don't know I want to see? And that's where recommendations are part of that experience. So, I want to see that. That's an easy question to answer. Mm-hmm. But what I like these things, how do I know? And then you've got to give up a certain amount of privacy, which goes back to the personalization piece, which, can be kind of creepy. That, wow, you know me too well. You're suggesting these type of movies to me to, how much more data do you really have on me? But I think the younger generations are giving up all that privacy stuff so that they can have convenience. And it's really coming down to convenience. Mm-hmm. And who's going to have that system.
But I think you're also at this crazy intersection of the need for variety versus the need for what I always do. I mean, if you're a sports junkie, you're a sports junkie, and that's one thing. But if you're just like looking for movies or something, or an entertainment, pure entertainment, I don't think that you don't always want to be fed the same thing. You might like action movies, but you know, my wife's sitting there, so we're going to watch a romance tonight. You know, just regardless of whether I want to watch an action movie or not.
How about a romantic action movie?
Yeah, then
there
we're
you
talking,
go.
right? So, but I think the need for variety intersects with what people like, and I don't know if humans and what they consume are so dialed in.
I think for interactive TV today, whether we want it or not, still 92% of viewing is happening on your cable channel. The cable is on, and play with other things. And I think in pay TV, there's no recommendation. Really. I mean, you just open the TV and flip a few channels, and if you know it's happening at this time, you just tune to it. So no innovation going on there. On the OTT, on the interactive TV side, it's really fragmented. So if you're inside Netflix, you get recommended Netflix recommendations. If you're inside Hulu, you do the same. But there's nothing that you can do. When I was actually at Rovi for a few years, and several attempts at having the global guide or the Omni guide, whatever. You can technically you can do it, but no one would allow you to do that because they want to be owning that recommendation, that customer. That's $7.99 a month. So I think this is the problem is where people are sitting and watching a lot of content. There's no recommendation because pay TV is not going to do it. And then where you can do recommendations, which is the interactive TV, it's a fragmented world. Maybe Netflix will end up swallowing everything out there, and will all be just one monolithic pay TV in the future. It's a very bad prediction. But I think that fragmentation is in the way of making this interactive TV experience and recommendations richer. And that's an issue I think it's going to be with us for some time until there's a bigger solution.
Maybe there's a link to why millennials don't watch TV.
That's right.
Could be. Another area of interactivity going forward is the ability for the viewers to select different storylines that might be so that as a show proceeds, it could go in different directions based on a viewer saying, I'd like to see that person succeed or that person get arrested or what have you, and that might also vary in terms of how much people might want to do that in a lean back experience on a television versus if they're watching it on a lean-in device, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a phablet or what have you. And do people have an interest in that, or do they just want to be entertained without being part of the development of the story? How many would think that they'd want to be involved with the development of the story? One, and with 1.5. I saw a little bit of that. But would that be on both a TV set and the mobile devices, or do you think you'd want to do it more when you're doing a lean-in experience? It's all you. No, the half's behind you there.
Well, isn't the gaming experience really about creating your own story? So if you're a gamer, you're creating your own stories, and that's really at the heart of entertainment is story creation. And
So I used to be a part of the gaming industry, and that was always the mantra of game developers. If you watch a movie, a little bit aside, if you watch a movie, one of the great things about a movie is that you can make the audience cry or laugh or really evoke tremendous emotion. And that's what the gaming industry is trying to do with their content, is actually evoke that emotion. And no one's really quite cracked it yet. It's very entertaining, very popular, but nobody's able to crack that emotion. So by creating your own story, are you able to make someone cry at the end of that interactive experience? I think once that happens, once we figure out the technology to bring that level of realism and interactivity to gaming, and maybe it won't be called gaming anymore. Maybe it will be called, create your own story type of content. I think you'll see a shift there.
I can't imagine ever intentionally choosing I want to cry.
Yet you watch a sad movie.
Well, I watched a sad movie, I have a gun to my head.
I don't know, I saw Twitter's stock price, I think they chose to cry today.
That's a sad movie.
But they did also make a nice acquisition to soften the blow.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're a writer, though, or if you're a producer, or if you're an actor, I think the last thing you want is people to not be engaged with the story that you're spinning for them, right? You're presenting something to people, and the idea is engagement, not necessarily interaction for long-form programming. Totally different for sports, I think, and for short-form programming.
Yeah,
But for
I think it's
dramas, we could
difficult
try.
if you're premeditating what's going to happen, that you will get any sort of reaction
Yeah.
to the extreme.
Now, if in life I could choose who gets arrested, that's a completely different.
Yeah, you can't break the experience by, oh, now pick, you know, and I think that
That's what breaks that emotional.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
gaming, from the very beginning, you're not thinking about picking, because if you watch a gamer or a kid or whoever, they don't think about the buttons they're pushing. They're more engrossed. So.
And you do see the interactive experience, I think, a lot in gaming. My second son is 11, right? And so he's online playing all these online multiplayer games, and I've seen him basically cry at the end of one of these. Where he lost the mission and he didn't achieve this, challenge he was trying to do. But he'll have his cell phone sitting next to him, talking to his buddy who lives down the street while they're both playing the same game online together, and they're talking back and forth, and he's running out of minutes and all of this. I mean, that's pretty interactive. And then you get things like, is it Twitch, where the kids can basically, video themselves playing a game, and you'll have hundreds of people watching them play a game, and they'll do it for hours at a time. And, talk about gluing the eyeballs, and the people into that interactive experience.
So a little bit more on the game side, but not a game itself. When I first asked the question, people probably thought about it more in terms of dramatic programming. I mean, that could be comedies too, but, story-based. You already see interactivity in terms of voting on various shows for American Idol, and which does have the impact of having somebody win or lose. And for those sorts of types of programming, how do people feel? Do people actually get engaged with that and participate? Or is that a different generation than what we have in the room here? Right. Yeah. Right. But in terms of how desirable it is or important in terms of your experiences here, you like to just see what other people have voted on and just leave it at that?
We actually, in my household, we actually had kind of a negative experience with that scenario, where with The Voice, where they have the app you can download and vote for your favorite person. And it was someone that we actually knew that was local to us that was on the show. So my wife and my son and I, we all downloaded the app and used it to vote. And the thing was so intrusive, because it was constantly like pinging us with notifications and messages and things popping up that we didn't really care about. We just wanted it for voting. Right. And as soon as the guy was kicked off the show, unfairly, I might add, but as soon as kicked off the show, that was the first thing we did, was delete that app. And so it actually left kind of a negative perception for us of the show, because of the way that it was
Well, that's
designed.
because of the way it was designed.
Yeah, talking about the kind of things
Right.
that
Yeah, the
you
user
guys are working on.
experience is everything. I mean,
Yeah.
really is everything.
And I'd go back to the content creator, and, I'm trying to tell a story a certain way. Do I really, where's the kind of artistry that if I had let the users kind of pick and choose, and it's not really the story I meant to tell. So I would say that, we have this desire to lean back, be entertained, and that the people who create content are trying to tell a story in a particular way, and we're here to just kind of enjoy and engage. That sometimes interactivity is not what we want, and we're not looking for that kind of extreme engagement. I want to lay on my couch, I've had a hard day, just play some video and let me zone out.
You were talking about how you used 800 numbers in the 80s to do that. It just recalled in my mind, and many of you weren't around then, but during Expo 67 in Montreal, I forget which pavilion it was, but one of them had a program, and each seat had buttons on the right and left side, and as a group, they selected what direction the show was going to go into. So, that type of interest has always been there, but again, getting it right and especially in today's environment of these devices, is much different than the collaborative approach that was done when you were all in the same audience and doing something. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, just for those on the webcast, the answer is no. But there's one question here, and please identify yourself.
My name's Ryan Beeman, I'm with Funware. I was going to ask, at the very beginning, you started talking about how sports were kind of where everything was tied into, that's keeping, I guess, cable and satellite alive as the thing for sports. Did any of the four major sports actually create their own, like we're talking about WWE you mentioned.
Right.
They kind of have their own version with every event available on there. If any of the major sports did that, would that be the killer for satellite and cable?
I think that it's a big trade-off, right? They're getting paid already from the subscribers that watch it or don't watch it. Sure. So in order to, a lot of them look at it like, well, what's my cost of goods? How much do I have to sell it for in order to, make the same amount of money? And it's like, well, you hear things like, well, this channel would have to charge you $50, but it's because they want to make the same revenue and they're looking at apples to oranges comparison. So I think you're seeing a lot of the programmers, like were listed at the beginning, take that leap, right? And what you're seeing is they're taking the leap, but they're also trying to put bounds around it. So one of the most recent ones, I forget which one it was, but there's a limit as to how many subscribers that the operator can sign up for that program package.
Right.
Or that.
Well, in fact, for ESPN on Sling TV, there's a 2 million person limit, and then they sort of have to review. So
Yeah.
they haven't reached 2 million yet on Sling. But
Right.
Well, I think if you look at it from the broadcaster's perspective, if you're an ABC station, all of your prime time is available on Hulu. I think your daytime is available on Hulu as well. So the only thing you've got as an ABC affiliate or a company that owns a bunch of ABC affiliates is your live sports. That's driving your retransmission revenue. It's driving your audience. Everything else is available someplace else. So I think they're going to pay a long time. They're going to pay very, very well for that exclusivity. And at some point when that doesn't pencil out anymore, you might see a change, but that'll be a while.
there's an excellent book by a professor from Harvard Business School, and I don't remember her name, but the book is named Blockbusters. And it's a great book about blockbusters in a whole variety of industries and media entertainment for motion pictures. But also in the sports side, there's a great chapter about the relationship that the sports leagues have with their various program services, and they always want to have the capability of sort of enhancing their own leverage. So even though they had great relationships with the networks and the cable sports networks, et cetera, they formed their own MLB network and the NHL network and all the other networks that New Line is involved with. And it's not necessarily to cannibalize, but it does provide additional content availability. Look at the NFL network, and they had this. I'm not so thrilled about the Thursday night football because of the quality of the games on Thursday night, but they moved that into a premier side, and then CBS. They brought CBS back in to be the distributor of those games. And I'd really encourage it to read that. I just wish I remembered the professor's name, but it's an excellent book about that subject. Additional questions? Well, then let me ask you guys another question, and that is, going forward, what do you see as the biggest obstacle in creating better viewing experiences for the consumer, whether it's technical, whether it's business, competitiveness, or what have you, and also whether or not we'll overcome that obstacle? So who wants to go first?
I think I'd like to bring just to make 2 points.
Okay.
One on the business side. As we get more and more into these services and who owns what and so forth, I think the rights holders, at least on the sports side and the entertainment side, is getting more and more complex as a world. We have big sums of money being spent in certain sports. On the entertainment side, Netflix on one side, then everybody else, kind of different pricing. So that's a challenge that's going to be here for some time. Hopefully, all the user wants to, consumer wants to do is just watch the game, right? I don't care whether it's ESPN or DirecTV or whatever. Just give me access to the game live. And sometimes you have to go through 4 or 5 apps to get there. That's one side on the business side. On the technical side, I think device diversity is not converging, and it's if you have an Xbox, doing great, you can play anything. If you have a Vizio TV, depends on which app you're going to launch, you're going to have a completely different experience. So I think Android was an attempt at doing that, but you still have Tizen and you still have other operating systems and so forth. And so those platforms on the device side, what actually the consumer is going to have in his hands or her hands is still very diverse and not. We don't. That's another challenge for making the interactivity better.
It's sort of like the older days when every smartphone, had its own SKU that you sort of had to program to. And although hopefully it's not as broad as that, but because that really was a nightmare for a lot of developers. Mark, any thoughts here?
I think the biggest issue, I don't think it's technical at this point because we have the standards in place, but it's to basically the representation is to get around the typical old guide view, right? And to find the best way, and I'm not sure we found the best way yet, for people to have a common way of finding things across devices that have different control mechanisms like the touch screen or the remote control or things like that, and also the screen size. So I think the common experience is probably the biggest thing in my mind.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Rhodes?
Oh, I see, content discovery is, challenged right now. And my kind of picture of the future is we're going to have an AI that is like your cultural nerd friend who knows everything about movies, TV, and I think we also should be including a lot of the MCN content in this kind of discussion about entertainment content. We know everybody spends way too much time browsing, flipping channels, etc., that you're not even engaging in content. So if we had something that could look across all these things and you could just talk to it, hey, I'm interested in a thriller tonight, and it says, hey, I know that you like these movies. What do you think of this? It's available on your Amazon service. Great, tune it up. Great. So just getting that, becoming frictionless. Mm-hmm. And yet we're in a world where things seem to be fragmenting more across devices and direct-to-consumer, walled garden experiences that the content creators, broadcasters are creating. So I think that's the challenge, is how do we bring it together to make it easy for the consumer.
So before we go on to Jim, let me ask you a little bit more about that. So in the frictionless world, we've all had elements of frictionless applications now through Siri and other audio acoustic recognition, voice-controlled systems. Do you see those? I know that some of them are being offered with Amazon Fire, but do you see those becoming more prevalent, where you could talk to your device and say, I'm interested in this, and then maybe, because I don't know if they come back with a voice, they just show you what's on the screen, but maybe you have a Siri voice saying, well, have you checked out Daniel Craig's new show, maybe with a British accent or what have you?
Gene Roddenberry had it on Star Trek where the computer would talk, so I think he knew what was happening back then, and a lot of his stuff is true today. So I think, that conversational element is very attractive if you've ever tried it, where there's certain technologies where you could say, let me see every Matt Damon film, and it understands you instead of you having to create certain specific phrases to make it understand.
How does the audience feel about having that sort of voice-controlled feature built into their search and discovery experience? Positive on that?
If it works well.
If it works well.
Netflix has one that just doesn't work very well. It talks to you while you choose if you like the show or not. Whatever the algorithm is, it doesn't seem to.
But assuming those are refined to really work well and reduce friction, it would be a good thing.
It also depends on how you're listening. Is it the set-top box listening, or is it a mobile phone that's right next to you? And, is there audio going on the TV while you're talking and things like that? So I think that'll get cleaned up.
Again, it's all back to that user experience. And any vision that's not executed well will fail, and that's at the heart of it.
Yeah, the voice, control things tend to be, sort of the Achilles heel tends to be background noise. Any of us that travel have probably had the same experience that I have, where you're on the shuttle car bus trying to talk to the Delta, reservation system, and it just doesn't understand what you're saying, and you end up defaulting to pushing buttons again.
Right.
So, I think, again, you have to, the ideas are great, but you've got to really engineer it to work in a living room that has a noisy kid running around or a dog barking or whatever it might be.
Well, since
so
many
it
of
can
your
be used.
companies are, at the cutting edge of trying to overcome that, I mean, how soon do you think we'll get to that point?
I think you're already seeing it. Amazon Echo launched.
Right.
It was probably, and I'm not plugging Amazon for sure, but it's probably the best voice interactive system in the house with far field microphones. Technologically, it was really cool, but a lot of people can do it. I think that there's a lot of startups that were doing the same thing, and there's companies on this panel that are working on the same thing, I'm sure.
Right.
And I think you're going to see it within 12 months.
Yeah, our Media First, which is releasing this month, I think has that capability, and it's way, way beyond what I was expecting it would be as far as control goes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, look forward to that. Jim, I
Send me
think we're up to you on the
Sure.
biggest problems
Hurdles.
that need to be overcome.
It's always business issues, I think. I think we've been talking for years about discovery and the problems of discovery and how we can make discovery easier, so we know how to do it. But if Netflix can close down their API and suddenly they're not listed anymore in your choices, that's a problem. It's often the case that reducing friction for the consumer is not a good business decision for the content controller. And I think until that happens, and the way that'll get fixed is a 16-year-old in St. Petersburg will come up with a solution that's free and we'll all be screwed. So I think that's, ultimately, that kind of change gets forced from outside.
Right.
Because people are not necessarily inclined to make the right consumer decision when there's so many business issues that get in the way.
Yeah.
I agree with Jim. It's business issues. Amazon launched their Fire TV and said, "Oh, we want to make Netflix access available," and Netflix said no. Even though Netflix is the single biggest client of AWS, so it's this weird partnership conflict scenario, and that's where we made a long business out of aggregating all that. And we're a Swiss company, and we work across everyone, and we claim that Swiss nature, and I have a business because companies hate to work together.
Last but not least.
Yeah, I think for me, it's making the systems and the experience not just easy to use, which I think is incredibly important, but also extremely reliable, and making sure that the quality is always top-notch. And I think there are a lot of infrastructure challenges for service providers and ISPs and CDNs to make sure that happens as more and more video content goes over the web instead of over private networks, so to speak, from service providers. So being able to have really cutting-edge technologies for caching solutions, content caching, and being able to make sure that you have, as you mentioned earlier, if you're in somewhere in Africa or somewhere that doesn't have very good infrastructure, that you're able to have systems and software that can be used to make sure that the content is available when people ask for it, and have that be sometimes a combination of predictive and you also need reactive. They're pulling the content and you're using the algorithms around demand and writing that demand curve and making sure you can provide whatever content they want, whether you have it locally or you have to go back and retrieve it from some library in the cloud. You need to be able to do that quickly, and it's got to have high quality when it gets played.
Well, you've got the last word. I appreciate the panel here. Please join me in thanking them, and I also want to thank all of you. So I'm afraid to have one last raise of hands. How many people thought it was a good panel? Good. Well, we know you at least were listening. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day at Digital Hollywood.